Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. Water restrictions are in effect for the City of Raleigh for the first time in nearly 20 years as severe and in some areas extreme drought conditions continue in our state. WRAL Shaun Gallagher has been covering this and is here with what you need to know about these restrictions. Shaun, thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course.
It is so dry across our area, and we in Raleigh are in what's considered stage 1 water restrictions right now. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so it is the lowest level of a drought restriction that's put in place. Basically, Falls Lake, where Raleigh Water draws some of its water from, is below a certain threshold for the time of year that it is. And that threshold is 85% full. We are, at last check from Raleigh Water, at 84%, so just beneath that. But Ed Buchan with Raleigh Water told me if this happened a month later, I mean, just like a couple of weeks when we're into May, he doesn't think that we would be facing these restrictions because the threshold then goes lower because we are later into the warmer part of the year. It could be about 75%, at which case we're 9 percentage points above that, so we wouldn't be in these drought restrictions. So right now, just because it is so early in the season and we have passed that mark, this is out of an abundance of caution. They don't know what lies ahead for the season that is coming up. I mean, it is historically hotter and drier in, July, August, and things like that. That's why that threshold goes down. If it continues to be this hot, we may go below what those thresholds are based off what we're seeing right now.
Okay. And so that's good context for people to know kind of how we got here and the numbers game that goes into all of this. What are the actual restrictions that people are going to deal with while we are in stage 1?
Right. So basically, you can't use your sprinklers for the majority of the week. Only on Tuesdays and Wednesdays between midnight and 10 a.m. are people who are Raleigh Water customers allowed to use those sprinkler systems. If it's a Tuesday and you have an odd-numbered home, you can water between midnight and 10 a.m. And then Wednesdays it flips. The even-numbered homes can do so. But Raleigh Water says this does not eliminate, handheld watering. If you've got a flower bed and you want to, bring your hose out and spray it down, by all means, you can do that at any point during the week. It's just basically the way that it was described to me. If you're using a system that, your kids might run through to try to cool off, that won't be allowed except for those specific periods between midnight and 10 a.m. on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Okay. And, we've said several times already, this is City of Raleigh, but that might sound more narrow than it actually is. So who do these restrictions apply to? In other words, what areas use City of Raleigh water?
Yeah, it's really, it's kind of misleading, right? Because it's called Raleigh Water, and you'd think that means Raleigh, but that does extend to the surrounding areas. There are also areas of, Apex that, they pull from Jordan Lake. They're not on Raleigh Water, so they're not in this as well. So it's really, if you get water and your bill says Raleigh Water, then you need to abide by these rules. This is going to affect anybody who uses Raleigh Water right now, and that is a number of people. But again, this is out of an abundance of caution. It is only a couple of days a week that you're allowed to water, and really it's just, good practice. The fact that people can still, fill up a watering can and do it. They can still, spray down their yard if they so desire. This is the lowest level, and again, out of an abundance of caution.
Right. And with that said, is there any way to know how long these restrictions might last, given what you said about, the threshold for needing to be in stage 1 is different as we get closer into the summer months?
So it's going to sound more dramatic than it is, but when Raleigh Water talked to me, they said they expect these to be in place into June. I know a whole month and a half of these restrictions may feel like the sky is falling, but when I was talking to Ed Buchan, he told me, they do this so that they're not constantly bouncing back and forth between, hey, you're under these restrictions, now you're not, now you are. The reason being, we don't just need to get back above 85% in Falls Lake in order for us to, lose these restrictions. They want to get well above that 85% for the time being so that they're not yo-yoing back and forth between putting the restrictions or taking them off. So Ed, when he was talking to me, was kind of roughly remembering that it might be 95% at this point. But again, that threshold's going to go down as the other trigger percentage goes down as well, getting into May, June, and July. But for right now, he's telling people you should expect to, follow these rules for the next month and a half or so until we get into the month of June.
Let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back. So, Shaun, now that we've kind of gone through how we get into these restrictions, what they actually are, what are the consequences for someone if they were to break these restrictions, maybe water their lawn more frequently than they're supposed to?
Well, it could cost you. I mean, the City of Raleigh is talking about fines that could go into place. Now, what that means, Raleigh police aren't going to come knocking on your door saying, turn your water off, you can't be watering your lawn right now. But they are civil fines that could be applied. But this isn't going to be extreme where, if you are caught watering your lawn at, 10:15 on Tuesday and you're an odd numbered house, that they're going to, immediately, charge you for this. It'll start with just a warning. That's the first instance that if you're caught doing this, that they'll warn you, educate you about this, and basically say, don't do this, From there, it's a $50 fine if you're caught again. A third time, it would become up to a $200 fine. And then in extreme circumstances after that, Raleigh Water tells me they could go as far as, shutting off the water for somebody who's using it for irrigation purposes out of these parameters and guidelines. But again, that's going to be an extreme circumstance and probably, an individual that we would end up covering, because it seems that it would be an extreme amount of water that you're going above and beyond what they're guiding you to do. So, I mean, overall, these are just guidelines in place to try to protect us for the long haul as far as the water that we have is concerned. And Raleigh Water is going to work with you to make sure that, this isn't just a financial penalty for people who happen to put a little bit of water on their lawn, but they want to make sure people are following those rules as well.
Right. And like you said, this is sort of a precautionary period that we're in right now. I'm sure education is very important, especially because it's been so long since we've had any drought restrictions in place in the city of Raleigh. So with all that said, though, again, this is stage one. There may be people asking, okay, well, what does stage 2, stage 3 look like if we were to go into those? So what are some of the differences there?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, we are far off from getting to even stage 2. So again, sky not falling. It would take a long time with no rain at all for a month or two for us to get there. But if we were to go to stage 2, essentially take the rules that we have in effect right now, and you couldn't do any sprinkler system at all. That, no time of day, no day of the week, no odds, evens, nothing like that. You just couldn't use sprinklers. Now, stage 2, you could still do that handheld watering. That's both your hose by hand, or if you're filling up, a bucket of water, or, you're trying to flower your plants or anything like that. You still could do that in stage 2, but when it goes to stage 3, it gets extremely strict from there. It's no watering at all. You can't do a bucket. You can't do a sprinkler. Maybe you could just use your bottled water if you have that, but that seems extremely cost prohibitive, so I would avoid doing that. But level 3 would be very extreme, where nobody could water at all.
Right. Like you said, long way from there. Hopefully That's nothing that we need to worry about. But we do know that, drought is becoming more and more common, hot temperatures, all those things. So is there anything that the city could do to make our water system more resistant to drought than it is already?
Yeah, so in theory, yes. I mean, there's a number of things they could do, but are they feasible? Raleigh Water tells me no. Things like dredging Falls Lake, that would create more capacity for the lake to hold more water so that we wouldn't necessarily hit these percentage thresholds. They tell us it's just not worth it. They would have to pay a ton of money to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then they would have to find somewhere to put that soil that they would be dredging up. And it's likely that soil has metals or other contaminants that they would have to properly dispose of. Again, just very cost prohibitive in that way. But also, Ed Buchan tells me Raleigh Water is looking for its next water source. But don't get your hopes up, because the first thing he mentioned was that, they could include another reservoir in Lake county. Sounds great, right? Adding another reservoir. He says they've been talking about that since the 90s. So who knows when that could come to fruition, but he says they are actively looking. But, how feasible that is going forward or when it could happen, who knows?
Right. Well, all things we'll keep an eye on. Thank you so much, Shaun. We appreciate your reporting on this.
Of course.
And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.